Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now. At LateNightSportsRadio.com.
With more credibility than Roger Goodell, it's the FantasyGreek.com's Week 2 starts and sits in 60 minutes on Late Night Sports Radio. Welcome back, folks, to week number 2. I am Keith Grieve, one of your illustrious hosts. I'm joined by Jim Saranteas from the FantasyGreek.com, as always, and as a special treat to all of you, since 87 Sports Fans Live did not air, I made a special request, and my compatriot Steve Taylor from 87sportsfans.com is also joining us as a special treat just tonight. Welcome aboard, gentlemen.
I'm awake, alert, and ready to go.
How the hell are you guys?
Fantastic. You know why I'm fantastic, Jim?
Tell me why, Keith.
Because for once, I won the week last week in picks.
Oh, that was such a rough week, though.
Oh, my God. I went 11-5 last week.
How the hell did you do that?
Well, you know, I'll tell you what. I went 11-5. Jim went 9-7, and Steve brought up the rear at 8-8.
Well, I could see Steve doing that, but I'm telling you, I thought I went 11-5. What are you kidding me?
Well, you picked the Saints, you picked the Rams, you picked the Ravens, you picked the Bears, you picked the Chiefs, you picked the Pats, and you picked the Bucks.
That's 5 games.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The Saints, the Rams, the Baltimore Ravens, the Chicago Bears, the Chiefs, the Patriots, and the Bucks. Those are all the games you got wrong.
Okay. Wow, well, congratulations to you. That's pretty darn impressive because that was kind of a wild week. I heard a lot of people complaining of their own personal picks.
Yeah, and the games that I got right that you guys got wrong was I picked the Falcons and I picked the Titans to beat Kansas City. Steve-O picked the Bengals. He was the only one that picked the Bengals. And, well, Jim, nothing special about you last week. You didn't do anything by yourself.
They said that last week was one of the worst weeks for sport books.
Wow.
People lost well, not bad for them, bad for the people that were betting. It was good for the sport books because people were losing left and right because not only were the surefire teams losing, but even the teams that were supposed to win that did win didn't cover the spread. Which is craziness.
Right. It was. I mean, there's a lot of games you just scratched your head, and the New England game was one that jumps to mind last week. But without rehashing too much, because we are bound and determined to get you through this in 60 minutes, folks. We don't want to waste any more of your time. The phone number to call in with your lineup questions and concerns is 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. We are going to plow through the Week 2 schedule and bring you all of the information that Jim has locked up in his noggin, but don't hesitate to interrupt at any time. 585-633-7487. First on the docket is the Thursday night game. The Pittsburgh Steelers travel to the Baltimore Ravens. Both teams with back-to-back division matchups to start the season. The Steelers beat the Cleveland Browns in a surprisingly close game, 30-27. And the Ravens dropped the ball at home, no pun intended, to the Cincinnati Bengals. Looking at this, the Steelers put up 500 yards. Running back Le'Veon Bell looked to be living up to all of those expectations as far as fantasy owners go from the preseason. And for the Ravens, not a whole lot going on the ground. Joe Flacco put up the ball a ton. And he's not that kind of quarterback. I know he got paid a bunch of money, but in my opinion, he's not that quarterback. And then you look at everything that's happened in the last 5 days, or, well, really 3 days, really, with the Ray Rice disaster. That, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, has to be a distraction. There's no way it cannot be a distraction, even though he hasn't. He was suspended for the Week 1 game, but now his contract is terminated, and it's all a question of who knew what and when did they try to forget it, and blah, blah, blah. It's just not going away anytime soon. I'm going to pick the Pittsburgh Steelers to win this one on the road.
And you know what? I think those are some very astute observations, and I think there's other people that feel that way. Specifically, I'm referring to Rick Flieger and Rick Briggs over at Asylum Sports, who actually did the game preview for this game for the Fantasy Greek. They're picking the Steelers too, but I'm going to take the Ravens. This is going to be a defensive battle between these two teams. They historically, when they play each other, it's a no-holds-bar, grudge match, punch-in-the-face kind of outing. And I don't care what happened with Ray Rice. I think they're past the Ray Rice thing. It's been out there for a while, and there's just nothing else they can do. So they're going to come and play football. And in fantasy, you have to sort of – and there's a lot of games this week that we'll talk about where we're going to have a very good defense against a very good offense, or, you know, a pretty good defense against a pretty good offense. And it's going to be tough to pick some players this week. So the way I see it is you're definitely starting Le'Veon Bell. That game last week certainly told you this guy's the real deal. Even if he has a poor game, it'll be a good game in fantasy. You start Antonio Brown every single week. When you have a nice defensive game like this, you got to look at the tight ends. Heath Miller, Dennis Pitta, they should be on the gridiron. And I think you got to get Torrey Smith, who historically can potentially have a big game in this setting. If you want to play the defenses, you can do it this week. Certainly the Ravens. I think last week they showed why they're going to be good this year because they kept that team in the game until the offense got back on track. Now, players you're going to be taking risks with are going to be Marcus Wheaton. If it's a potentially low-scoring game, this is not a week that you want to roll out Marcus Wheaton, even though he had a great game last week. And I think when it comes to the running backs, and I agree with Flieger and Briggs on this one, when it comes to the running backs, Justin Forsett, Bernard Pierce, you might want to stay away from them too until everything settles. The dust settles on these two, and we figure out exactly how they're going to be used in this offense. And for God's sake, Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Flacco, bench these guys. This is just not the game I would want to roll with either of them. I would go with a backup or your starter, depending how you have these two on your team. But I'm taking the Ravens.
All right, Steve, who do you got?
Real quick, this was a push game before all the stuff came out with Ray Rice. I do think it's going to be somewhat of a distraction pre-game and whatnot, so I am picking Pittsburgh.
All right, second game on the docket. The Miami Dolphins travel to the Buffalo Bills. The surprising Bills, who are now suddenly under new ownership, which not for nothing, on a side note here, is a fantastic move. The team is going to stay in Buffalo. It's an owner that has roots with the Sabres. He's committed to Buffalo. It's great for the franchise, even if they did sell for less than the L.A. Clippers, who don't even own their own stadium. But anyway, moving on. The Bills surprised the world by going to Chicago and stealing a game from the Bears, which is another story for another day. But here they have Miami, who in their opener beat the New England Patriots on their home turf and beat them convincingly, 33-20. You look at the Dolphins, only 169 yards, but guess what? They're almost exactly the same as the Buffalo Bills in every category last week. 169 to 167 in passing yards, 191 to 193 in rushing yards. This is Bills to Dolphins comparison for those keeping track at home. But Miami managed to score a little bit more points. The Bills gained a ton of yards on the ground against Chicago, who was supposed to be revamped, but they also allowed a bunch. And this is where it's a division matchup. You know, usually you throw records out the window. And due to that, I can't believe I'm going to do this, I am going to pick the Bills to win this at home.
Mm-hmm. You know, Keith, that's not a shocker. This is another one of these games, just like the last game, where as far as the confidence level in picking the game itself, I'm not very comfortable with. But I'm going to take the Dolphins in this one. I like what I saw against the Patriots last week. That is a much better team than the Chicago Bears that the Dolphins beat. I love their defense. I know they're going to be missing Donnell Ellerbe. I believe it's for the season now, so that could have some sort of an impact. But there's just too many reasons, I think, to go with them, and they are the guys that you can start in fantasy. Ryan Tannehill, Noshawn Moreno, Mike Wallace, Charles Clay. The only person I see for the Bills really making a big impact on that side of the ball is going to be C.J. Spiller. Outside of that, I get real hesitant with most of the other players. I mean, I like Freddie Jackson. I mean, what are you going to do? He's a guy you can start. But, you know, you could look at the defenses too, I suppose, if you wanted to. But other than that, it's not a game ripe with fantasy talent, and I would sort of, except for the players I had mentioned, shy away from the rest. And I just like the Dolphins in this one. Right. I think they're the better team for right now.
Steve-O, who you got?
I'm actually going to agree with you again, Keith. You know, I look at the Bills. They did some things that impressed me in the game against the Bears, and you're looking at a team that's going to be incredibly fired up. The fans are going to be fired up, and the Bills have proven in past seasons that even if they don't have the best team, when they're at home, they can play at a very high level. So I just think emotion and whatnot is going to push them over the edge on this.
It honestly could go either way, but in these long, salty division matchups, I tend to side with the home team when I think that the teams are pretty much even. And last year I was all about the Dolphins, but I'm not falling for it again.
Especially if they bring out I'm not saying they're going to, but I can only imagine they're going to bring out the new owners, maybe even have them do the coin flip or whatnot. That stadium is just going to become almost like Seattle. It's just going to be rocking. So Miami, I mean, they're going to a really tough place.
I like the word salty, Keith. That was really good.
You like that?
Yeah.
I brought that out just for you. I knew you would appreciate it.
Yeah, salty dog.
God bless.
All right, next up, Jacksonville Jaguars travel to the Washington Redskins. Opening week, the Jaguars got out in front a little bit, and Nick Foles looked a little rattled. Looked very un-Folesy, if you can say that after one season, or even a half a season, really. The Redskins went down to Houston, and the Texans smacked them around a little bit, and they lost 17-6. The Jaguars put up 306 yards of total offense, but only 64 on the ground. The Redskins are a little bit more. They're not by any stretch of the imagination an offensive juggernaut, but they are a little bit more complete on the offensive side of the ball at this point in the game. On defense, the Redskins' defense last week performed a little bit better as far as yards they allow. They're at home. It's still the Jaguars. I don't feel comfortable picking against the home team in this situation. I'm going to take the Redskins.
And for once, I agree with you. Maybe agree too. Or I'm Steve. I'm sorry. This is definitely a game for the Redskins to win. That was a disappointing game they had last week. Certainly, they were exposed. But one of the things I think they're going to emphasize against the Jaguars is the passing game, and going to just turn it up with Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson. And I think Alfred Morris is due for a big game this week. This is the Jaguars' defense is a defense I think that could be run on, and Alfred Morris will be the guy for it. Most of the other plays in this game, like Toby Gerhart, Marquise Lee, even Alan Hearns, who was quite impressive when I was watching the tape on him. He's an impressive player. I wouldn't blame anybody who picked him up off waivers this week. I don't know that I would have spent a waiver wire pick on him, but I think he's somebody that you could put sort of in your back pocket and wait and see what happens with Cecil Shorts and Robert Griffin III. They're all risky plays, but there's positives. There's things going in their favor, so you can turn to them if you're in a jam, but otherwise I would likely avoid them taking the Redskins at home.
All right, Mr. Taylor.
I as well will take the Native Americans. Trying to be PC. No, the Redskins. Jacksonville's a disaster. I think they showed their true colors in the second half of that game, and their running game is atrocious. So I will pick Washington.
Did anybody see the picture I tweeted of the Redskins' new PR campaign?
I don't believe so.
It's just the Redskins logo, and all it says underneath is, "We're not Ray Rice."
Oh, Jesus. That works.
All right, moving on. Next up, Dallas Cowboys at the Tennessee Titans. Hey, the Titans welcomed last year's darling, the Kansas City Chiefs, and guess what? Won pretty soundly, 26-10. The Cowboys, on the other hand, Tony Romo looked absolutely atrocious. The only person that liked Tony Romo's game last week was Jay Cutler, because Tony Romo was the only one that had a better game or a worse game interception-wise. But the Cowboys here are on the road. Tennessee played well against Kansas City, who, for all of their personnel losses, and yes, they had some offensive line issues as well. Their offense wasn't supposed to be an issue. Yes, I know they were missing Dwayne Bowe as well, but the Tennessee defense showed up. Dallas still doesn't have a defense, and while Jake Locker is really pretty much auditioning for Ken Wisenhunt, I am going to pick the Titans in this game as well.
You were onto something last week when you picked the Titans. I remember we had talked about it either before or after you made the choice, and they looked good last week, quite frankly. They started really rough. I was in a Chiefs bar of all places at the time, and the Chiefs fans were just going nuts for how the Chiefs were handling the Titans early on. But then Jake Locker got comfortable, and he started moving the ball, and he started making plays. The Titans' defense pretty much shut down the Chiefs' offense, and especially Jamal Charles. You transfer that over to a Cowboys team that was completely devastated by the 49ers in their gameplay. I don't care what anybody says. And you start realizing that the Cowboys are a lot more human when they play a team like the Titans that actually still has a good defense like they did at the beginning of last year. So you're going to look at their playmakers for the Cowboys, DeMarco Murray, Dez Bryant, Jason Wynn. You're going to get them on the gridiron. But out of, let's say, all those three, DeMarco Murray would worry me the most. But I don't think I would bench him just because he's a playmaker. He's a guy that can thrive in these situations. For the Titans, how about Kendall Wright? Get him active. Get him in this lineup, and definitely get Delaney Walker active, because the Cowboys gave up, I believe it was 2 touchdowns and 40 yards passing to Vernon Davis last week. And you know what? If you're looking for a sneaky player, need help, I think the Titans' defense is definitely an option this week. Players that are risky and more of a coach's decision, Tony Romo, I don't like him. Terrence Williams, I don't like him. Sean Green's risky just because I don't quite think we've seen exactly what the Titans are going to do with their running backs, but he's got some upside because this is a Cowboys defense again that can give it up to the position. I'm taking the Titans at home.
All right, Mr. Taylor.
I am also taking the Titans, and I just seriously believe that until Dallas puts the team on DeMarco Murray's shoulders instead of Tony Romo's, they're just not going anywhere. Because Tony Romo, I feel bad for the guy. It looks like he has nothing on his passes anymore. Every throw last week was just a fluttering lame duck, and it was kind of sad to see. But I will definitely go Titans.
All right, we move on to the Arizona Cardinals at the New York Giants. You want to talk about a guy that doesn't seem to have it anymore? Let me show you Eli Manning. It was put out on Twitter as I was craning my neck between the screen and my phone last week. Maybe Eli's just done. Maybe it's not a question of whether he was elite or not. Maybe he was pretty good, and for whatever reason, he just doesn't have it anymore. And sure, you can point to this and that, but he is not. He barely looks like an NFL quarterback sometimes, and it's very scary. It's also kind of sad because the drop-off has been absolutely catastrophic, sudden, too quick to really process. On the other side of the ball, you have the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals. The only season they were ever successful was when Wisenhunt took them to the Super Bowl, and Santonio Holmes broke their heart. But guess what? They put up 403 yards of offense last week, 294 through the air, 109 on the ground. They only scored 18 points, but they're moving the ball. Their defense only gave up 52 yards on the ground last week against San Diego on Monday night. It was a 1-point win home against San Diego. Phillip Rivers is pretty good. You got the Giants. They went to Detroit, got blown out 35-14. Couldn't stop anybody. So guess what? I'm picking the Cardinals to go into New York. Now, if you follow this show, I never pick West Coast teams traveling east. I'm picking the Cardinals to go to New Jersey and beat the Giants.
Where are all the people that were calling Eli Manning an elite quarterback today? I'd like them to step up and try and explain again why he is an elite quarterback. Look, this is Keith. Everything you've said is absolutely correct. This is the Cardinals' game to win. From a fantasy perspective, I love Carson Palmer. I think it took him and the Cardinals a little bit of time to get things going last week, but once they did, they looked great. Andre Ellington, he wasn't bad for a guy that had a lame foot. Let me tell you, I was really, really stunned by that. Michael Floyd, I think he is one of the top plays this week against a very suspect Giants secondary. And you absolutely got to love the Cardinals in this instance because that offense for the Giants doesn't look like it really knows what it's doing. Rashard Jennings is probably the only Giant that I really liked for a play this week. And tight end Larry Donnell. I've heard some people say, what we saw last week, the 56 yards and the 1-2, that's probably what about you're going to see from this guy, if anything. But what's more impressive was I think he had 6 catches on 8 targets. How is that a tight end that's a guy that you need to pay attention to. So if you pick them up, this is a game I think you could go ahead and give him a shot. If not, leave him on your bench and see how he does. Larry Fitzgerald, I don't know. I mean, I know people said, he wasn't really part of the offense, and they need to get him involved, and I think they're going to get him involved. He's not losing anything. I mean, he's still a great receiver, but boy, from a fantasy perspective, he always carries some risk, and everybody else, I kind of would avoid, except maybe Victor Cruz, and even that, and that's only you're planning because you probably drafted him pretty high. I'm taking the Cardinals.
All right, kick it over to Steve.
I am also taking the Cardinals because they are the better of the two teams, but I will not be surprised if the Giants win this game, just because Arizona is one of those teams that they're going into a game that they should definitely win because they are the better team and they end up losing them. So I'm picking them, but it wouldn't shock me if it turned out the other way.
All right, the New England Patriots travel to the Minnesota Vikings. Patriots last week went to Miami and got a little sand kicked in their face down in South Beach, losing 33-20. Where's my numbers? There they go. 315 yards per game, 89 on the ground, 226 for the Pats. Not bad, pretty average, pretty pedestrian. On defense, though, they gave up 191 yards on the ground. They go to Minnesota, and last time I checked, they had a pretty good running back. I don't know. Maybe you heard of him. A little man called Adrian Peterson. But that being said, this is not your father's Patriots. This is also not your father's Vikings. And whether Matt Castle is the real deal or not doesn't matter. He's at home in comfortable surroundings, and I think the Patriots are reeling. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to pick the Patriots to go 0-2. I'm going to pick the Vikings at home.
Wow, that's huge, Keith. That's really huge. I'm going to take the Patriots. I just can't see them losing 2 games, even though I can see that there is a potential upset in the making. In fantasy, you're playing Tom Brady, you're playing Julian Edelman. Rob Gronkowski should get even better this week. And I like their defense. This is a game that the Patriots have to be mad about what just happened, and they're going to come out and they're going to make a statement. As far as the Vikings are concerned, AP, of course, Cordarrelle Patterson, of course, Kyle Rudolph, of course. Other than that, all the other players are sort of suspect, with the pass game, I think, being the bigger emphasis with the exception of Adrian Peterson. I'm taking the Patriots.
I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I am going to agree with Keith.
Wow.
And the only reason I am is because I have always been a huge Adrian Peterson fan, and being at home, I think he's going to run all over the Patriots. But a person who I thought had flatlined last season showed signs of life, and that is Greg Jennings. And if they can get him into the game the way they did last week and get the ball to him, because he still has the playmaking abilities that he showed in Green Bay, I think he could help give the passing game a little bit of life, which will take some pressure off of AP, which will help him, open up some holes, open up some lanes. So I'm going to go Minnesota. I can't believe I'm saying it, but I'm going to go Minnesota.
I want to make a quick comment on Adrian Peterson, and that is this. I was very hesitant about him this offseason because he is 29 years old. I know nobody wants to admit that he's 29 years old, and he's coming off a down season, meaning 2 years ago when he came back from that knee surgery and looked fantastic last year, his numbers were way down. And I'm not quite yet a believer that he's 100% into this season. I'm not quite a believer that he's necessarily the Adrian Peterson from 2 years ago. He needs this game to prove it. He either breaks out and leads this team to victory, or they lose, and we'll know the rest next week when we talk.
All right. I admit this is a little bit of a reach game for me, but I got a feeling. I don't like it on the turf, indoors, at home, and they got gouged on the ground last week. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Brady's my quarterback, so I hope I'm wrong.
It's outdoors.
Is it?
Oh, yeah, because the Vikings, they're playing outdoors this year and next year.
Oh,
yeah.
To get ready for their new stadium?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Huh, I missed that. Fell off the radar on that one.
Well, there you go.
Wow. Okay. Moving on. The Saints travel to Cleveland to play the Browns. The Browns went into Pittsburgh last week, into the Lions' den, and nearly pulled it out there, losing 30-27. The Saints, on the other hand, they traveled to Atlanta, which, when I look at the Saints, if they're playing in a dome, really all that matters is who's the crowd cheering for, because they're going to do their game in the dome. And sure enough, they hung with the Falcons, and managed dropping it late, 37-34. So what to expect in this game? I usually do not like the Saints going outside on grass. They are a completely different team. The problem for the Browns is they not only have big question marks at quarterback, now running back Ben Tate is out. And I know the offensive line can totally make or break the running back and not the other way around, but I think the Saints just have too much talent to lose this game. I'm picking New Orleans on the road.
And I did that. The Saints should be dominant in this particular game against the Browns. They're coming off a very tough loss, and they're just going to sit there and throw the ball on these guys. Mm-hmm. The Browns' defense is good, but it's not that good. So you're starting all your playmakers on the Saints: Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, Jimmy Graham, definitely Brandon Cooks. Mark Ingram is just playing incredibly well right now, and if you have him on your team, I think you have to play him almost automatically as a low-end RB2 or definitely a flex play. For the Browns, Terrence West is going to be starting, and I don't think that he's a poor fantasy play. I think he definitely makes for an RB2 or a low-end flex play. But other than that, I'm not very comfortable with too many other people, except maybe Andrew Hawkins. And that even, I think, is a stretch. Jordan Cameron, check his injury status. I know there's been some reports that his injury isn't as serious as first was thought. And this will be a different Browns team when Josh Gordon gets back on the field, which I predict will happen next week.
Oh, wow. All right. Steve, who you got?
I'm definitely taking the Saints. I think they're pissed off about their loss to Atlanta. And they're going to go in there and just roll over the Browns. And I'm going to make the call that Breeze is going to have a minimum of 3 touchdowns. I think you could see a 4. I won't go as high as 5, but 3 to 4 touchdown game from Breeze.
Yeah, it's they just
3 to 4 bagger from Steve-O. Mark that down.
Right. Mark that down. All right, the Atlanta Falcons travel to the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I just said, the Falcons won that close game against the Saints at home. Now they're on the road. Cincinnati went into Baltimore, came out with a touchdown win. What did they do? Well, let's see. They what do you say? They passed the ball, 445 yards for Matt Ryan. Oh, they also ran the ball, 123 yards as well. Cincinnati, on the other hand, 301 yards from Andy Dalton, only 79 on the ground. That running game is in flux. It's not going to carry them. This team only goes as far as Andy Dalton will take them. That being said, the Falcons are healthy. They're resurgent. And the Bengals are a good team as well. But there's one thing about the Bengals that I don't like, and that is Andy Dalton. I'm not an Andy Dalton fan. Everyone can tell me up and down, and they make good arguments why he's a good quarterback, why he's a decent quarterback, why I shouldn't hate on him so much. However, that all being said, they're the home team here, and they're not bad enough to lose this game. I'm picking the Cincinnati Bengals at home.
For a second there, Keith, I thought you were going to go the other way.
I know.
I did too. I thought so too.
I did that on purpose.
Well, I agree. This is a Bengals team that the biggest problem for the Falcons is going into Cincinnati, a place where the Bengals are historically dominant. I believe it was last season that they won every single one of their home games. They're a different team at home. They play tough. They play mean. And unlike you, I like Andy Dalton. I actually love him for this game. He threw, I think, 330 yards last week, but it was just 1 TD, which is what made it so bad. But this is one of these games that is shaping up to be a 2 to 3 touchdown game for Andy Dalton, and I like him. I think he's a risky play, but I think he's very startable for anybody that has him. You're going to start your Falcons in this despite what you think about the Bengals defense, especially Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Roddy White, simply because they're weekly guys you got to start. I mean, they can put up the numbers. They may not be the greatest, but they're going to be solid. So you get them in your lineups. Gio Bernard, love him. AJ Green, love him in this matchup. And I'd roll out the Bengals defense. I would not let the fear of the Falcons passing offense make you think that you shouldn't be playing your Bengals because you should be. They're that good. In terms of risky plays, Levine Toilolo, who I would like to see get the football a little bit more. I don't think he's the regular weekly starter, even though it's a positive matchup. Jeremy Hill, he makes for a positive play because the Bengals actually said we need to get this kid the ball more, and you know what? They do. Steven Jackson, I'm just not a fan. And I'm real hesitant. Right now, the whole backfield for the Falcons is in flux. And it would just take one key injury to one of them to sort of, I think, solidify what the role of each one of them is. But for right now, they're all splitting the load. I'm taking the Bengals at home. Roar, roar.
Steve.
I can't roar like that, so I don't know. But I'm taking rar rar. I'm taking the Bengals as well. I think they are no matter what Atlanta did last week, I think the Bengals still overall are the better of the two teams. And just to me, I think the Bengals are out to make a statement this year. They believe that they are a Super Bowl caliber team. And I think each week they're going to go out and get stronger and stronger. And if Dalton can keep from throwing the ball to the other team like he did last season, I think they can make some serious noise.
All right. So all three of us are taking the Bengals?
Yeah, roar, roar.
There's you gotta roar. It makes me remember that South Park episode with Big Gay Al's Animal Sanctuary.
That's right.
Roar. There's a gay lion. Roar.
Roar.
Fantastic. All right, Detroit Lions go to the Carolina Panthers. So last week, wake up Sunday. Hello, Cam Newton's not starting, right? Derek Anderson is your quarterback. Well, if you're in a league that uses the team quarterback, you weren't worried. But everybody else who was planning on starting Cam Newton was scrambling to their computers. And guess what? They win in Tampa, which we all picked Tampa that game last week. They win 20-14. The Detroit Lions open up at home on Monday night against the beleaguered New York Giants. It came away with an easy win, 35-14. Calvin Johnson looked just like the Calvin Johnson everyone expected him to be. Matthew Stafford looked good even in a new offense. Detroit is dangerous. We talked about it in our NFL preview show. They could be really good. We just don't know who they are. That being said, the Carolina Panthers defense is real good, real solid. But I just think that Detroit has too many weapons, and that Detroit defense, it ain't too bad either. I'm actually going to pick the Lions on the road here.
And I'm going to take the Panthers at home. I think the Panthers showed a lot last week by winning without Cam Newton. And I think Cam Newton is a lot healthier than people have been led to believe. He had a real nice press conference today and looked mighty healthy and mighty confident about what his job and what his role is to do. And I like the Lions' defense, but I think their secondary is suspect. And unless that defensive line can get up in Cam Newton's face, which it could, I think the Panthers are in a position to win this game. From a fantasy perspective, this gets back to you've got some really good playmakers, but you've got a couple of good defenses here. So it's really hard to not – I mean, you have to think if you're starting Matt Stafford against the Panthers, there's some risk that he could have a bad game. You have to think if you start Calvin Johnson, he'll have a good game, but maybe certainly not the game that he had last week. But you keep starting guys like that. Same thing with Reggie Bush, Joique Bell, which Reggie Bush I think you need to check on his health. Joique Bell for the – Panthers, I think you're rolling with Cam Newton this week, Kelvin Benjamin, Greg Olsen, and obviously their defense. The Lions' defense is startable, but I think you've probably got a better option. And then other players that you need to sort of be cautious of. I think D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart, this is a good Panthers rushing defense. And then for the Lions, Golden Tate. I like Calvin Johnson in this game because he is just that talented, and I have a hard time believing there is a defender out there that can stop him. But for Golden Tate, I think that's a little bit different. But I'm taking the Panthers at home.
All right, Steve?
I will also take the Panthers at home. Last week, not only did they look great on the field, but the coaching, Ron Rivera and his assistants, the game they called was just they had a fantastic game plan, and he is quickly becoming one of my favorite head coaches. It just seems like with the direction they're taking that team, they're just going to keep getting stronger and stronger. And I have a lot of faith in them, and I see them taking this game.
Yeah, it's one of those games. I just think Detroit has too many weapons offensively, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but we say that every year about Detroit, and they always end up where they end up. So,
yeah, and they are a different team on grass versus turf, or even they have that field turf at Ford Field or whatever. It's a little different. They are a little bit of a different team. All right, the St. Louis Rams travel to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and everyone scrambled to the waiver wire to make a claim for Austin Davis, didn't they? Right? All right, the Rams quarterback, now that Sean Hill's a long shot, according to NFL.com, to play for Week 2. Guess what? I'm not going to break this game down anymore. Tampa Bay is at home. If they lose this game to the Rams, they should just fire Lovie Smith out of principle, okay? Tampa Bay wins this game.
I like that, Keith. That was really good.
I'm just saying. I mean,
that was brilliant. I'm taking the Bucs too, and from a fantasy perspective, Vincent Jackson should have a huge game. And you've got to like the Buccaneers defense. They're probably the top start this week. For the Rams, there's really nobody to like except Zach Stacy, I suppose. You know who could have a really tough game here is Doug Martin. This was a Rams defense that held Adrian Peterson for naught. And, regardless of his health, and if it's not him and it's Chris Rainey, then Chris Rainey's another guy I would avoid. This is just not shaping up to be a good game. I know some people like the Rams defense, and they do make for a positive start, but they're not at the top of my list. And hey, how about that Brian Quick? I had talked about him, and he proved himself last week to me. I think he's their second best offensive player, and while this may not be the best week to play him, I think there'll be some games that he'll be playable. I'm taking the Bucs.
All right, Steve-O.
I will also take the Bucs, and I agree with you, Keith. I think that he should be fired on principle, but only if they lose the game and Josh McCown has another atrocious game like he had last week, and they don't pull the plug on him and put Gleason in. Because I still think Gleason is the starting quarterback on that team.
You mean Glennon?
I think the Josh McCown, what he did last week showed what he truly is as a quarterback. Last year was a very great, and it was a good story, and it was an anomaly.
You mean Mike Glennon?
I think what's that?
Mike Glennon?
Gleason, whatever.
You are preaching all about Gleason, and I'm thinking to myself, the hell did I miss? I mean, I didn't know the
Glennon. Jackie Gleason. They need to dig Jackie Gleason up and put him in there. No. I'm exhausted. Glennon. I got the G right, and everyone probably figured out what I was talking about.
It's nothing but a J thing.
But Josh McCown was horrible last week. I mean, that was awful.
It was bad.
Told you, he's a system quarterback. Glennon should have been the quarterback from day one. Once again, Lovie Smith screws up a young quarterback situation.
Well, let's hope he makes a quick change if it's another situation like last week.
No, he'll rig a quarterback competition next training camp. Anyway,
oh, God.
Just like he did with Orton and Grossman. Anywho, let's go on. Move on. Seattle Seahawks travel to the San Diego Chargers. You know what? Phillip Rivers, he's a nice quarterback. He's going to make things happen. Guess what? Seattle is the best defense that this league has seen in a long time. Yes, better than the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, right up there with the 85 Bears. This defense has not missed a beat. If you watched that opening night game against the Green Bay Packers, they knocked people around silly. Marshawn Lynch looks better with a holdout. He's becoming the poster boy to have running backs hold out because he ran that much better. The Seattle offense has a new wrinkle now that Percy Harvin seems to be staying healthy. Every time he was breathed on, I was waiting for him to break a leg, but he stood the test, and who knows what will happen this week. But I like everything about Seattle. They are not showing any weaknesses whatsoever, and even though they're going on the road, they're still staying on the West Coast. I'm going to pick the Seattle Seahawks.
I really like the San Diego Chargers, and I expect them to have a bounce-back game, but just not this week. Even if you like the San Diego Chargers at home and you believe that they're a better team at home, Keith is absolutely right. This is a tough Seattle defense, and you have to look at them that way. You have to look at them that way at home and on the road. And if you just look at their talent, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, Percy Harvin, their defense, they're all great starts in fantasy football each and every single week, and you should be starting them as such. I like Ryan Matthews for the Chargers. I think the Seahawks are a team that could be run on. And one of the things I saw out of Ryan Matthews last week, I saw grit, I saw determination, and I saw toughness. And those are three things, if you have them, you can run on the Seahawks. Phillip Rivers is going to have a good game eventually, just not this week. I think Keenan Allen and Antonio Gates, they make for positive plays, but they're risky. You may not get the kind of numbers that you're expecting from them, even though you're going to probably have to play them. Ladarius Green, I think you have to avoid him at this point because last week that was just a great lesson in Antonio Gates is still the man, and until Ladarius Green supplants him, he's probably a player to avoid. And I like the Chargers defense, just not this week. Go Seahawks.
I also will pick the Seahawks. They are the best team in the NFL, and once again, Russell Wilson is going to prove to the world that he is the biggest financial steal in all of professional sports around the globe. Because he is just fantastic. I'm becoming a big fan.
Not for long. He's going to make a...
Yeah, seriously. They better get ready. Paul Allen better sell one of his yachts. They're going to need the money.
Do something.
Paul Allen will pay.
Oh, yes.
The Houston Texans travel to the Oakland Raiders, the land of Derek Carr, who didn't look half bad last week. Yeah, only 151 yards, but he completed 20 of 32 passes, threw a couple of TDs. He's a rookie quarterback starting on a less than stellar Oakland Raiders team. They go to New York, travel cross country, which is very hard for West Coast teams to do, and they lose by 5 to the Jets, 19-14. The Houston Texans welcomed the Washington, whatever you want to call them, into their stadium, and promptly the defense stood up, rose up, and held them to a 17-6 thrashing. However, not without a cost. Jadeveon Clowney out 4 to 6 weeks with a torn meniscus. So, what do I expect out of this game? The Raiders may not be as bad as everyone thought they were, but they still aren't good. They just are not very good. They gave up 212 yards on the ground last week. Texans still have Arian Foster, even if Ryan Fitzpatrick is on that roster still. But the thing about Fitzpatrick is that he can go through spells where he plays pretty much mistake-free football and doesn't look half bad. In fact, he might look good enough. Even though they're on the road, I'm picking the Texans in Oakland.
The Texans looked rock solid last week defensively, and they did just exactly what they had to do on offense to win that game. And the same thing here, except I think they'll actually sort of get a leg up. Arian Foster, Andre Johnson, and the Texans defense are all due for big games. And outside of those three, there's not too many people. Maybe DeAndre Hopkins that I would consider as a positive play. I will say this. If you didn't notice today, late in the day, Maurice Jones-Drew had surgery, I believe it was on his wrist or his hand, and he's going to be out for a few weeks. Because the waiver report's already been out and most wires have processed, you might want to consider running out and grabbing him right now is Latavius Murray. Because even if McFadden is the starter, I think Latavius Murray is going to get some work, and he's a player that could easily overtake both of them and lead this team for the rest of the season. I'm taking the Texans.
All right, Steve.
I am taking J.J. Watt. I think he could beat the Raiders by himself, so I am picking Houston.
Oh, that's fantastic. He's not the best color man in the industry for nothing, folks.
Thank you.
All right, the next game up on the docket, the New York Jets travel to the Green Bay Packers. Well, the Green Bay Packers, they aren't that team that won the Super Bowl. They're just not. Their defense is nowhere near, but they still have some guy named Aaron Rodgers, and he's still pretty good. What you saw last week, he made some throws that you don't characteristically see Aaron Rodgers make, across the field throws that resulted in turnovers, things that you don't normally see him do. We'll chalk that up to week one against the best defense, like I said, that this league has seen in a very long time. That being said, he's facing the Geno Smith New York Jets. Even though Chris Johnson ran well, Chris Ivory ran really well, and Geno only threw 5 incompletions, 23 of 28 for 221 and a TD. He's not facing the Raiders this week. The Packers, even though they are not good, they're good enough to beat the Jets at home. I'm picking Green Bay.
Green Bay should rule this weekend out there in Lambeau. It wasn't the fact that they lost the game, but it was the way they lost the game last week that sort of kicked them in the butt and should get them to come out and play even better, even stronger at home. And you just have to expect the passing game to come alive, and hopefully Eddie Lacy is healthy enough to play. He should be, and you're going to start all those guys. You're going to start Aaron Rodgers. You're going to start Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Eddie Lacy. And for the Jets, you've got to like what you saw out of Chris Johnson and Chris Ivory last week. That was very impressive. And with the Packers struggling defensively, mean, there's no question, Keith. You were absolutely correct. This is not the same championship team that we've seen in the past that had, I won't say a dominant defense, but a defense worth rolling with. Those are two guys that you should start. Get Chris Ivory into your flex and take the Packers at home.
All right, Steve.
I'm also going to take the Packers. I think they're going to have a bounce-back week. I mean, last week they were actually mounting a comeback before some stupid rookie mistakes and penalties put a kibosh to that. And also this week, a lot of the talking heads on sports radio were questioning Eddie Lacy's toughness. So if he can play, I would not be surprised if he comes out with a full head of steam and just runs over them. So I'm going to pick Green Bay.
I missed that. What were they saying about Lacy's toughness?
They were just saying that how it looked like Marshawn Lynch was running like a man and like a man that wasn't afraid, where Lacy was running like he was afraid.
Were they watching the same game? Jim, did you see that?
No. I mean, whoever said that, that's ridiculous. I can't. Let's not even give that any more time. Let's move on.
No,
that's what I say. I think he's going to be pissed. If I heard that and I was him, I would go out there and start biting people's heads off.
If there's a problem with Eddie Lacy in that game, is that Green Bay went away from him too much. He was having success. I thought he was running tough. I thought the exact opposite.
I agree.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think that's where the whole problem with a person who I think is very talented in Starks, they're going too much back and forth. They need to. I understand they want to keep him healthy, and it's good to have somebody like him in the backfield behind Lacy, but they just need to get one guy and give them the majority of the carries because they're too much back and forth.
That seriously is the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time. Anyway, okay, we're going to move on. Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos because we're running out of time. Chiefs went into Tennessee. They were home against Tennessee, and they lost to the Titans. Now, the Chiefs got out to a really fast start last year and ran up a nice record, but they have holes. They're missing a lot of people on the offensive line. They're missing Dwayne Bowe. The Denver Broncos still have some guy named Peyton Manning under center, and their defense is pretty good. Julius Thomas with a huge week last week. Thank you for me. There's no reason to pick against the Broncos in this game at home. I'm picking Denver.
Broncos are going to dominate at home. You're starting Peyton Manning, Monty Ball, Demaryius Thomas, Manuel Sanders, Julius Thomas. And for the Chiefs, expect a bounce-back game from Jamal Charles. What we saw last week, that was just ridiculous. Jamal Charles should be having a big game here, even against that tougher defense. And I think Dwayne Bowe comes back, a different man, and he's definitely worth a wide receiver 3 play this week. Alex Smith is in a positive matchup. He is playable, but he's just very unpredictable. I'm taking the Broncos.
I will as well take the Broncos. I think that they're going to roll in this game, and Peyton Manning could probably sit after halftime.
All right. The Sunday night game, the Chicago Bears travel to the San Francisco 49ers. Well, the Bears, they should be pretty angry at the way things went last week. Jay Cutler threw a bad interception in the fourth quarter. I broke that play down a little bit on my blog post at 87sportsfans.com this morning. But let's not forget they were down 17-7 to the Bills at halftime. That defense still has major issues. All of the personnel moves that look great on paper, they are not executing at all. They were fooled time and time again by play-action pass and misdirection. This is not Pop Warner. And if Mel Tucker can't figure this out, then Phil Emery and company is going to look like a bunch of horses' asses for not firing him instead of the 2 assistant coaches they fired last offseason. The Bears have real issues on defense that they still have not figured out, and the 49ers still have Frank Gore as their running back, and Carlos Hyde looks like he is the real deal. Even if he is right now just a change of pace running back, I don't think the Bears can defend this team very well. The Bears' offense might score some points. Cutler is Jay Cutler. You're going to get a couple picks if you ask him to throw 50 times a game. It's just that simple. And historically, the Bears have been pathetic in San Francisco. If you don't pick the 49ers, you are playing with fire.
For the Bears, you're going to start their playmakers, every single one of them, Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Martellus Bennett, because they are not the Cowboys. This is a much more talented offense than the Dallas Cowboys, so we should see better play from the Bears. But the one player that I'm sitting is Jay Cutler, because if there's anybody that is going to make some mistakes in this game and whose numbers will get depressed because of that 49ers defense, it's going to be Jay Cutler. The team that's going to win this game and probably dominate this game is the 49ers. For them, I like playmakers here, from Colin Kaepernick to Frank Gore to Carlos Hyde to Anquan Bolden to Michael Crabtree and to Vernon Davis. The 49ers defense, you start them all, and I think this is going to be sort of a wake-up call for the Bears.
Steve-O.
All right, I will also go to the 49ers. They looked strong last week. I still don't think the offense is quite to the point where they were last season, but they did show some definite signs of improvement coming off a pathetic preseason. And I feel bad for Matt Forte in Chicago. He had a great game, one of the best of his careers. And, the defense has issues. And as of the first game, so far, Jay Cutler is who I said he was. And I am, as a Bears fan, saddened that I so far am right with what I called on him. So I hope he does improve and stops throwing it to the other team. It's sad. It really is.
You still remember that he threw for 350 yards and 2 touchdowns, right?
It doesn't matter, though. He just doesn't look comfortable. He looks shaky. I have no confidence when he drops back to throw the ball. Every time he throws it in the air, it looks like it could get either picked off or caught. You know what I mean? It's not like watching one of these elite quarterbacks like a Brady or a Manning or whatnot. When they throw the ball, you think their receiver's going to catch it. When I see Cutler throw it, it's a coin toss to me. I have no confidence in his release, in his decision making, and like you said, the only person worse right now is Tony Romo.
I will fight you tooth and nail. The only reason they were in that game is because of Jay Cutler.
Okay,
yeah, I would agree with that statement.
All right.
No, I disagree. Matt Forte was the only reason they were in that game.
Because he was receiving the ball. They stopped running the ball.
Yeah. Hey, listen. One important thing too on this 49ers Bears game is the Bears do not play well there. With the exception of the 85 Bears, somebody can check me. I would not be surprised if they've lost every single game in San Francisco.
Yeah, they've been atrocious. Absolutely.
Well, because wasn't it the following season at San Francisco the Bears got eliminated?
No.
In '86, wasn't it?
No, that was Washington.
It was Washington.
That was Peyton's last game. I remember.
Right. All right, God, we're at the end.
Last game, the Monday night game.
Woo.
The Philadelphia Eagles at the Indianapolis Colts. If you listen to the NFL preview show, I felt for Andrew Luck, but I don't think the Colts really had enough talent to do anything. That being said, Andrew Luck almost won that game last week by himself. They ended up losing to Denver 31-24, but Denver got up big, and then Indianapolis had to fight back. Now they're home against Philadelphia, which Philadelphia is all offense. You know what you're going to get from them. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to pass timely. And what I really liked about the Eagles last week was that Nick Foles was able to recover from a couple early fumbles, which you worry about the psyche of a young quarterback with turnovers like that. Are they going to get out? Are they going to psych themselves out? The Colts got shredded by Peyton Manning on defense, 259 through the air. They gave up another 102 on the ground. Gave up, like I said, 31 points and a 50% third down conversion. Philadelphia is too good offensively. I'm picking the Eagles on the road here.
I'm going to take the Colts at home. First off, that's a place that the Colts play well in historically. They know how to defend their house. And much like as you pointed out, Keith, Andrew Luck is a productive, put the team on my shoulders kind of player. And Reggie Wayne, T.Y. Hilton should absolutely dominate this game, put up some fantastic fantasy points, and you get those guys going. On the Eagles side, I do like Nick Foles, LaShawn McCoy, Jeremy Maclin, and Zach Ertz. It's going to be a high-scoring game, probably the highest-scoring game the entire weekend. But I think there's just a little bit more there for the Colts. Just a little bit more for the taking. And the players that are sort of fringe players for the Colts will play better at home than they did on the road last week, especially against the Broncos team that I think it's left a bit of a bad taste in their mouth. And somebody that I do like, Ahmad Bradshaw. He's going to get a lot of work in this game because it's going to be a lot of passing as opposed to running. And somebody I absolutely don't like for now and for the rest of the season until you hear otherwise, Trent Richardson.
Wow. Steve-O, who you got?
I am going to have to go with Indy at home. There was a lot of positives that came out of that game against Denver, and Andrew Luck did almost bring that team back. I don't want to say single-handedly, but in Denver, opening night, Denver had a lot to prove after the Super Bowl, and Indy made it a close game. And so for me at home, Andrew Luck is quickly becoming one of my favorite players. He is just such a fantastic talent, and also just the leadership he shows is amazing. And I just think that this team, the sky's the limit with them, really. If they can stay healthy and bring in a few more players over the next few years, I just think they're going to be fantastic.
Yeah, they really got to give Luck the support that a quarterback like him needs, because if they do,
he needs a better running game.
Well, yeah, and I think personally they could get better defensively. But
yes, I agree.
That being said, I mean, if you give a guy like Luck the complete package, like you said, Steve, you're absolutely right. The sky is the limit with them. That could be a team that owns that division and contend for the AFC repeatedly, like they did with Peyton Manning. All right, we got 3 minutes, just under 4 minutes.
And I have a special request. Can you take us out with the Beastie Boys once we get to the 4-minute mark?
Can I take you out with what?
With the Beastie Boys, my friend.
Yeah, you want the outro to be the Beastie Boys?
Well, you didn't play it on the in show, so why not play it on the out show?
We were having technical difficulties, so I just went with it.
Next time. Well, what can we do with 4 minutes?
4 minutes. We can go over my lineup.
Yeah, do it.
Well,
what do you got?
All right, so
You're playing against me, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Playing me. He's playing me.
Well, yeah, in our league I'm playing Jim, but in my home league it's me and Steve. So this is a fantastic week for me. This is either going to be a really fun Monday night next week or a really long Monday night next week. I got my quarterbacks, Jay Cutler or Carson Palmer. I was going to start Carson Palmer against the Giants. He's a limited participant in practice today with a shoulder injury. Have you heard anything about that, the severity of that?
I have not, but I think he's fine.
Okay. The other thing, Doug Martin didn't practice with a knee injury. So I have a flex slot where Doug Martin was, and I have Brandon Cooks. Is he an every week starter now?
Yes, I would say he is.
Okay. I drafted him expecting to eventually he would get to that point, but I wanted to kind of see how he worked himself in.
Well, they're playing the Browns. I like Brandon Cooks this week. I mean, I like everybody on the Saints this week.
All right, Steven Jackson against the Bengals. I know you're not. It's kind of.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
Is there another choice?
No. Sean Green against Dallas.
Look, Sean had I think 70 yards last week, which I was very disappointed in. But this is, I mean, he's eventually got to push for 70 to 90, and he's got to score a touchdown. This could be that week.
All right. That's all the questions I had. I wish we had more time so that Steve could get equal time. And we have a phone call.
Oh, last minute, yes.
Yeah, last minute phone call. It's our friend of the program, Eric from Ontario, New York. How are you, sir? You got a minute 44.
Okay, 2 questions, both fantasy related. I got Dexter McCluster or Chris Johnson. Who do I start?
It was McCluster and who?
And Chris Johnson.
Oh, Chris Johnson, hands down.
Okay. Awesome.
Play really, really.
Next one is Fitzgerald or Anquan Bolden.
Oh, Anquan Bolden. I mean, I really think the 49ers are going to thrive. And if you read my weekly starts column, I always have top 5 plays for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense on the website, thefantasygreek.com. I'm pretty sure I had Anquan in that top 5 last week, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be putting him in the top this week. And what I had mentioned was last year when he was in the lineup with Vernon Davis and Michael Crabtree, he absolutely thrived. In 5 games with them, he had roughly around 430 yards on 30 receptions and 2 TDs. How's that?
That's awesome. And one more real quick. I got Andy Dalton and Ben Roethlisberger as my quarterback, which is pretty shameful. Would I take Andy Dalton starting?
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. That was the autoplay on.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I have Andy and Ben. Who do I take? Andy Dalton?
Go ahead, Jim. You can answer. Jim, are you there?
Yeah, Andy Dalton.
Andy Dalton.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, we're out of time. I'll continue the outro now. We're out of time. We'll be here every Wednesday night, folks, to give you your fantasy football advice. Call in 585-633-7487. For Steve Taylor, I'm Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com and Jim Saranteas from thefantasygreek.com. Good luck, and may the odds be forever in your favor.